Well, good afternoon. It's been 2 months since our government took unprecedented action to protect people from the spread of COVID-19. We declared a state of emergency and closed down the province. It was a difficult but necessary decision. As we saw what was happening to healthcare systems and economies around the world, we started preparing. We ramped down scheduled surgeries, we stepped up screening and limited visitors to our long-term care homes. We expanded our lab capacity for testing. Ahead of the March break, we closed our publicly funded schools to keep our kids, teachers, and staff safe. A few days later, we closed down non-essential workplaces. We banned public gatherings of more than 5 people. And we took immediate action to protect our seniors and most vulnerable. Everything we've done, every step we've taken, has always put the health and safety of the people of Ontario first. We listened to our health experts and acted quickly. And within 8 weeks, we've come a long way. We avoided the worst case scenario, an estimated death toll of 6,000 people and tens of thousands of infections. There are many reasons to be optimistic right now. Yesterday, we had 294 new cases, the lowest increase in 6 weeks. Today, we have 308 new cases. But please remember, we're looking for a trend, and these numbers are a good sign we're going in the right direction. And over the past few days, as the trends continue to improve, we have started reopening certain parts of our economy and getting more people back to work. This reopening will continue to happen gradually but steadily as soon as it is safe to do so. Starting today, curbside retail is open for business. Hardware stores and garden centers are open. Seasonal businesses and auto dealerships are open. Construction on many sites is restarting. And our provincial parks and conservation reserves are starting to reopen today for limited access. We're reopening things safely and with strict public health measures in place. Today, thousands of people are going back to work. Thousands of people are earning a paycheck again. We have a framework to reopen our economy gradually and safely. We have workplace safety guidelines that will help businesses adapt to our new reality. My friends, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. We're working to get more businesses and services up and running again as safely as we can. And I will have more to say in the coming days about the next steps in the safe reopening of our province. My friends, we have a long road ahead of us. We're at the start of a long journey of recovery and rebuilding, and I want you to know that through it all, your government will stand with you. I will stand with you. I will be there every step of the way with you, because as long as I am Premier, you can rest assured that I will stop at nothing. Your government will stop at nothing to protect you, to support you, and to have your back. We will stand together, shoulder to shoulder. We will get through this together. And together, we will come back stronger and more united than ever. We will come back more determined than ever. We will rebuild what we have lost. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. Now I'll turn it over to Minister Phillips.
Thank you, Premier. As we see more positive signs on the public health front, the fight for business owners, for workers, and for families continues. Ontario's action plan responding to COVID-19 was our initial $17 billion response to the global pandemic. It provided $3.3 billion in direct support for health and $3.7 billion for people and jobs, and an additional $10 billion in cash flow support for individuals and businesses. From doubling support for the most vulnerable seniors, to providing electricity price relief for people, small businesses and farms, to offering tax deferrals for families and employers. Throughout the pandemic, we've worked with partners at all levels of government. We provided our municipal partners $148 million so that they can support local charities and nonprofits helping our communities. We've worked with the federal government to make nearly $1 billion available in rent relief for Ontario's small businesses. And we provided pandemic pay for frontline heroes who are working for all of us during COVID-19. We launched the Ontario Together procurement portal, where we've received to date 20,000 submissions and generated nearly $170 million in purchases of critical equipment and supplies for the front lines. We also launched a new $50 million Ontario Together Fund to help businesses manufacture essential medical supplies and equipment. The economic fight will continue. Our Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee is actively working towards the next important step, reopening our province so we can get the people of Ontario back to work safely. In preparation, over 80 workplace safety guidelines have already been released so employers know how to keep their staff and customers safe. And that includes a 14-point document on curbside pickup and delivery. They can all be accessed at ontario.ca/COVID. They were developed in collaboration with businesses with real work experience, including our own retailer, the LCBO, who shared lessons and learnings on how to operate during the height of COVID-19. We are all going to have to work together to get our economy growing again. And now more than ever, the Ontario spirit will ensure that we're successful in these next important steps. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to Minister Elliott.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and celebrate our amazing nurses on this first day of National Nurses Week. Day and night, our heroic nurses work tirelessly to care for the people of Ontario. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Over the past few months, Ontario's healthcare system has demonstrated remarkable responsiveness to the COVID-19 outbreak. That is in large part because of our partners on the front lines, including our nurses, doctors, home care, hospital and long-term care staff, personal support workers, and first responders, among many others. As we've confronted COVID-19, we've made historic investments to dramatically expand hospital capacity and support the brave heroes working on the front lines of our healthcare system. This year, our government is investing $3.3 billion more in healthcare, the largest year-over-year increase in a decade. We're investing in personal protective equipment and other supplies to protect our frontline healthcare workers. We're providing urgent funding for long-term care homes for screening, staffing, and infection control as we work together to protect our most vulnerable. And we're investing in public health units to support contact tracing and case management so we can limit the exposure of new cases as we gradually restart our economy. Together, we have made real and significant progress in our shared battle against COVID-19. To every Ontarian who is helped by staying home and practicing physical distancing, thank you. Together, we will continue to make progress. We will continue to stop the spread of COVID-19. Thank you.
We'll go to the phone line for questions. Just a reminder, one question, one follow-up.
Just before the question, I also want to wish all the nurses, National Nurses Week. You're absolutely amazing. I've said this even before the pandemic. You're the backbone of the healthcare system, and thank you for putting your community and people ahead of yourselves when you walk through those doors every single day. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to first question. First question.
Your first question comes from Brian Lilly with the Toronto Sun. Please go ahead.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Premier. For weeks now, you've been talking about the need to start building PPE and many other things in Ontario. And I think you would find widespread support for that given what the province has gone through. But I'm wondering how you do that while not being in violation of trade agreements, be it NAFTA or trade agreements with China. You've been very open about free trade, about speaking out against protectionist measures, and in some way this could be seen as a protectionist measure. So how do you bring manufacturing back to Ontario, favor it for our health system, and still respect trade agreements?
Well, I'll always respect trade agreements, and I'm a big free trader, but when it comes to crisis and pandemics like this, we'll never be in this position again. We'll get domestic supply up and going. We'll go with true entrepreneurs that want to open up companies. We'll also go with existing companies that want to open up factories here in Ontario and supply not just Ontario, but the rest of the country. The rest of the country are relying on our manufacturing capabilities. And I am so proud of our manufacturing folks in Ontario that have changed over their lines and now producing PPE. They're incredible. Again, I go back to the ingenuity and the engineering might and the manufacturing might of our province. We are one of the greatest provinces, jurisdictions anywhere in the world. We have the talent, and we're going to make sure we're never put in this position ever again. And I'm so proud of everyone in this province. They're incredible.
Follow up?
Do you think that it's time for Ontario to start having its own stockpile? The Globe and Mail reported last week that the federal National Emergency Strategic Stockpile that was supposed to be there for backstop for the provinces had as few as 100,000 masks at the start of this pandemic. They seem to have decided that they didn't need to hold as much. Does the province need to say, you know what, we can't rely on the feds, we need to have our own, or does the federal government need to rethink what they need to do in the future with coming pandemics?
Well, I have to take care of Ontario, and I'll make sure it never happens again, that we have a stockpile, and we'll have that conversation with the federal government. They've been really working hard too, the feds and all the provinces have been working hard too, but there's certain areas that the rest of the country relies on, and when it comes to manufacturing, they rely on Ontario, and we aren't going to let them down. We're going to ramp up the manufacturing of PPE items throughout this province, and not only support Ontario, but support other provinces, as Alberta did with us. That's what's great about the Canadian spirit. When we were having problems, who stepped up? But Premier Kenney and Alberta stepped up and gave us 50 ventilators. They gave us a whole bunch of N95 masks. That's what a country does. We stick together, we support each other, and we'll always do that. But as a country, we should never be put in this position ever again, and we won't be.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Randy Rath with CHCH-TV. Please go ahead.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, Premier. There's been far fewer cars on the road, given that people are staying home. And over the weekend and in the last week or so, we've seen people driving like complete maniacs, and the police pulling them over, people going 200 miles an hour or 200 kilometers an hour. This weekend we saw a young man stopped going 308 kilometers an hour. What do you make of that sort of behavior?
First of all, that was reckless for that young man to do that. He put himself in jeopardy, his life, and I guess he had one of his buddies in the car too. I honestly, Randy, when I saw that 306 kilometers, I didn't even realize the car could go 306 kilometers an hour, 200 kilometers over the speed limit. No, that is just totally irresponsible and not safe. So even if there's no cars on the road, I know our OPP and other regional police departments around our province, they'll be keeping an eye on that. And you got to throw the book at these people, because they're putting everyone's lives in jeopardy when they do something that reckless and careless. So it's very, very disappointing. That young gentleman jumped in the car and did that. But you know something? Thank God he's alive, and thank God his friend's alive. That's the most important thing. I understand he made a mistake, and hopefully he'll never do it again.
Follow up?
There have been calls for the automatic license suspension in that sort of in a racing situation to increase the length of suspension and the vehicle forfeiture from 7 days to 30. Do you support that?
Yes, I do. Especially in that young gentleman, it should even be longer than 30 days of suspension. Someone going 200 kilometers over the speed limit. That's staggering. Absolutely staggering. So yes, I do.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Cynthia Mulligan with City News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hello, Premier. Um, what was your reaction when you saw the financial accountability numbers, the projections that we're going to be looking at a $41 billion deficit, which is double what the spring forecast was?
Well, before I pass it over to our finance minister, I said right at the beginning, we spent $17 billion, and I won't spare a penny to protect the health and well-being of the people in this province. We've also seen the revenues decline since the businesses are closing. But there's one thing I'm confident. I'm confident with the people of Ontario, the companies, and with our government. It's our job now to rebuild the province with each and every single person out there. I was just on the phone with people from cultural and tourism sector as well. And you know, we have great people. There's no one brighter and better than the people here in Ontario to rebuild. And we will rebuild, and we'll come out stronger than ever before. And again, I've been so proud of seeing how the 14.5 million people have pulled together, and businesses have pulled together as well. We'll get back on our feet, and again, we'll be stronger than ever before. But thank you, Cynthia.
Cynthia, and thank you for the question. First of all, I'd like to thank the Financial Accountability Officer for his work. And, you know, unlike other governments in Canada, we did decide going into March there was a need for us to look, you know, very seriously at the impacts of COVID, both from the point of view of the $17 billion investment plan, also look at the impacts on revenues. There's been a number of reports, a number of the banks have talked about a deficit in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 billion. We also had two credit rating agencies come out and affirm the credit rating of the province, DBRS and Moody's, last week. So we will continue to monitor. He ran a number of scenarios. Obviously, we're in the middle of both a health crisis and an economic crisis, so very difficult to be certain about what is going to actually unfold. But I'm very happy that we put a historic level of prudence into our financial plan. Also, as you know, every quarter I will stand up and make sure that we go through the finances. So I think the next opportunity for that is going to be late in the summer. But we'll do that on a regular basis so the people of Ontario know where we stand. And as the Premier said, we'll make sure that, you know, the province has the resources to do what it needs to do to protect the economy and to protect our healthcare system.
Thank you, Minister. And my next question for the Premier as a follow-up. Premier, last week I asked you about whether you thought families would be able to bubble so that, you know, I could take my daughters to go see my mom and have dinner with her. And you said, ask me next week. So I'm asking you now. The trend seems to be going in the right direction. And if you look at the rolling averages, it's still going down. Is that day coming?
Well, hopefully it's coming sooner because we see the numbers going down, but I really trust the judgment of the people of Ontario. If you have an elderly mother or father and their health isn't great, I wouldn't chance it. I'll give you an example at our home. We have the girls, and the girls came over. There was 6 of us, a direct family. None of the husband, boyfriends, no one came, just themselves. And I think if we can keep it to as small as possible gatherings, that would be very helpful. But you know, similar to your 2 girls, Cynthia, I hope you had a great Mother's Day, first of all, and hopefully they spoiled you. We do a lot. I got to tell you about you know, the girls. They're big into baking. My one daughter has a little online cookie company to keep herself busy, but they're big into baking. And what I heard, and I've heard it from many people, is about flour and yeast. There's a problem. So I'm setting up a meeting with their Minister of Agriculture to make sure, but as people are home, people are going to do a lot of baking, and as they're baking, they're going to need the supplies. So it's critical. The 3 top areas are yeast, flour, and sure enough, the old toilet paper again. But we're going to make sure that we have those on the shelves. It's so important. But and the supply chain as a whole is so important. So it's critical that we continue with the supply chain and have the proper items on the shelves there.
Next question.
And by the way, before I jump, I make the best cherry cheesecake ever. I do it from scratch. No recipe. I got it down pat. And again, you can tell I've eaten one too many cheesecakes. That's my problem.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Lisa Zing with CBC. Please go ahead.
Hi there. This first question is for the Premier. It's about question period resuming tomorrow for the first time in 2 months. In the past, when the opposition parties have held you to account, you've, with respect, often become defensive or sometimes lashed out. So are you personally going to respond to the opposition any differently now, take a bit of a different approach in the time of COVID?
Well, I think we all have to take a different approach as we did a few months ago. And it's not just one party, it's all parties when you get into politics. But I've never seen a time in the history of our country that parties, no matter what political stripe you're from, that have been collaborating. We've been collaborating with all 444 municipalities. We've also been collaborating with the other parties, provincially and federally. I can't say enough about our relationship with the federal government. We have a phenomenal relationship with the federal government, all the ministers. I have a phenomenal relationship with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Prime Minister. So you got to put politics aside sometimes. And you put politics aside and focus on the betterment of the whole province, we move forward. You know, there's lots of time to get into the mud and all the other nonsense. I'm just don't have the time. I'm not in the mood for that. I want to move the province forward. We have bigger fish to fry than argue with each other in the ledge. So we'll see what the opposition does. They've been pretty good lately. So I just want to thank both opposition parties, all three actually, for working with us. We've been very grateful for that.
Thanks very much, Premier. My follow-up is for the Finance Minister. It's also on the FAO's report this morning about the $41 billion deficit. Originally, you guys had forecast getting back to balance by 2023-24. At this point, do you have a better idea of when that will happen now, assuming the pandemic has changed this forecast?
Well, as the Premier mentioned, the pandemic and COVID certainly has changed everything. I'm pleased that we made the decision to do a one-year plan, but to provide that financial framework, which we did in March. Obviously, we will, by November 15th, have a full budget, which was part of our commitment. So that will involve a multi-year plan that will speak to exactly the kinds of questions that you're answering. But to be honest, right now, with the dynamic nature of the health situation and the really difficult element of the economy right now, internationally, not just here, it'd be, you know, there's many scenarios, and we look at all of them. And as I said, I appreciate the FAO's work. He also went out for 2 years, which is more than we had done. We just did a one-year projection, but we'll have to wait until, you know, sometime before November 15th, where we'll have a multi-year budget. And at that point, we will talk about a path back to balance. And we're all hopeful that by that point, the scene will be a lot clearer, not just in Ontario and in Canada, but internationally in terms of the economy.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Laura Stone with the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Premier. I'm wondering about your government's decision to extend the state of emergency. I understand that has to be done to pass certain orders, but when the public hears of this, I think some people might think, are we still in a state of emergency here? And what is it going to take for Ontario to open things up again and to move faster? What do you say to those people that wonder why we're still in a state of emergency?
Well, until we see a consistent flow of 2 weeks, and we've seen some really positive numbers, but we need consistency for 2 weeks. But to continue moving forward, yes, we're going to have to renew the state of emergency. You know, once we get through this, well, that's going to be taken off the table. And once we see the confidence within the system, and we see the numbers drop consistently, we're crossing our fingers. We're on the right path right now. But that, I give all the credit to the people in the health table as well, and the great job the Minister of Health has done, long-term care, the Minister as well. Everyone's pitching in. So hopefully we'll be able to see that sooner than later, Laura.
And on the question of having people over, you mentioned you had your daughters over.
Yeah.
Are we, what's the message to Ontarians now? Are we allowed to have our parents over? Are kids allowed to play with one other family at this point? Can we gather in groups larger of 5? What is the message?
Well, from the chief medical officer, right now, he still wants to keep it immediate family, and you know, I have 2 girls living with me, two not living with me, so I had 2 more there, but when it comes to seniors and our parents, I use your best judgment. The best thing to do is protect your parents, and hopefully in the next few weeks or month or whenever the numbers we see consistent, then you can go see your parents. But you know, people have they're the best when it comes to their own judgment and the health and well-being of their parents. So I'd be concerned, and I'd keep with the immediate family. That would be my recommendation. I wouldn't get into the big gatherings. If we had our whole family, we'd have 30 some odd people. It just can't happen. We just want to keep it with immediate family, just for a little bit longer. And I appreciate everyone's cooperation with that. And that's the reason, by the way, Laura, we were able to see the results, because of the great job everyone in the province is doing. They deserve all the credit. They're the ones who made this successful.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Lucas Meyer with News Talk 1010. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi, good afternoon, Premier. Thank you for taking my question.
Thank you.
Regarding Mayor Tory said he was optimistic last week that the feds in the province were going to get something done on funding municipalities. There's a $10 billion app being made by the FCN. Where are we there? Because every week that passes, at least for Toronto, that's $65 million lost, and of course they can't run a deficit. So can you say if we're going to have a deal announced soon on this?
Well, we're waiting for the federal government. That did come up in conversation with the Prime Minister and the other premiers. We're waiting for the feds to come out with their plan, and then we can always work shoulder to shoulder with the federal government. But we're still waiting to see what comes from the federal government.
And on the budget, Premier, are you confident that with the federal emergency programs that are being scaled back, as well as assuming the gradual, economic recovery continues, can you say absolutely that taxes are not going to increase for the rest of your term?
Well, again, there's no such thing as absolute when it comes to politics. We've held taxes, we've reduced taxes, but we're going to be prudent. We're going to be prudent fiscal managers. But again, when I say that, I'm going to make sure that we take care of the people of Ontario, no matter what. And I have confidence in the businesses and the people that we are going to gain new revenues. For example, we gained new revenues of over a couple $2 billion in the last year and going into this year, I should say. And then all of a sudden, this pandemic came along. So I'm confident. I have all the confidence in the businesses and in the province and the entrepreneurs. We'll get back there. We will get back there. But there's no one that watches taxes more than I do.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Colin DeMillo with CTV News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Colin.
Hi, good afternoon, Premier. So several sectors of the economy are reopening today, but a lot of workers actually cannot return to work without the appropriate child care. So is there any clarity yet on when child care can return province-wide?
So we're going to make it clear next week, early next week. We'll have an announcement on that. We'll also, before someone asks, we'll have an announcement for going back to school early next week. They're just crossing the T's, dotting the I's on the plan moving forward.
All right, thank you, Premier. And just another question. So tomorrow, MPPs who are coming to Queen's Park, they're going to be checked to see whether they have a fever or whether they have any COVID-19 symptoms. And my understanding is that they could be denied access to Queen's Park if they have any symptoms of COVID-19. That is quite an extraordinary step to take. How comfortable are you with restricting access to elected MPPs?
Well, if they aren't, if they're under the weather, they're showing high fever, that would scare me. They should be responsible, no matter if it's our party or someone else's, just to go home. Nothing's more important than protecting all the caucus members, no matter what party you're with. So I think it's all right just to make sure we're safe.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have.
That's great. Thank you, everyone.